My name is Phil Norris, and I'm conducting an interview with Bill Carroll, who was born in August of 1945, and he was born in Crawfordsville, Indiana, although he's a Chicagoan who grew up in Chicago. He currently lives in Daphne. He was in the U.S. Army, 101st Airborne during the Vietnam era, and was a Ranger. He was in service from 68 to 71. His final rank was an E7. He did receive a unit citation. Um, so, um, Bill, let me ask a question. Do you have siblings when you were growing up? And you said you grew up in Chicago.
Yes.
And could you tell a little bit about growing up in Chicago?
Well, I grew up at Taylor and Halstead, which was basically an Italian ghetto. So, or excuse me, an Irish ghetto. I don't know where Italian get in there. So everybody who lived within about a 10-block radius was Italian. I was one of the few Protestant Irish people in the area, and made it a little uncomfortable on holidays.
But you were a boxer too.
I became a boxer when I was 7 years old.
Because you were interested, or that you needed to do that to
I needed
survive?
to do it. I got jumped by two high school kids on my way home from school, and they basically beat me up and left me to die. And the closest building to where I was a Park District office, and I kind of got in there, and they cleaned me up, and the guy says, "You start boxing lessons tomorrow." Well, I didn't. I couldn't even move the next day, but about a week later I came back and they started me, and I stayed with boxing for a long time after that.
And you enjoyed Chicago?
I loved Chicago.
Okay. Tell me about when you entered service. What year, and what was that like, and why?
It was 1968, and there was no why other than the government's invitation.
Okay. And so you get the invitation, and what happened next?
Well, I had just finished college at that point, and in those days, if you had a college degree, they gave you 30 days to get in an officer's program. And during those 30 days, I found out that I was red-green colorblind, which just eliminated me from every officer's program there was. So when my 30 days was up, I went down to the APIS, raised my right hand, and got on the bus.
And the bus to, where'd they take you?
I did my basic at Fort Knox, Kentucky. I used to march by the gold repository every day. They weren't giving out samples.
So then they specialty training, or from
Went
there?
to Fort Polk, Louisiana, which I hope still doesn't exist today, but it probably does. They had a lot of names for Fort Polk, and most of them were derogatory and true.
Was that the Ranger training?
No, that was infantry AIT.
Mm-hmm. And so,
Kind of interesting how I got there. There were 4 people in my basic training company. A basic training company was about 250 people.
mm-hmm.
And about a week to go in basic training, they called us all into this big classroom and started reading off MOSs, what we're going to do. And we had a couple of guys who had gone to the first grade a couple of days and didn't like it, never went back. Well, they became rocket telemetry and counterintelligence, and the 4 people who had college degrees all went, 11 Bravo infantry.
So okay, after you finish your training there at Fort Polk, and so what's your next move?
Well, while I was at Fort Polk, we'd had a big tryout day. It was an unscheduled physical fitness exam, and there were some folks over there watching us, and didn't know it at the time, but these were the Ranger folks. So about a week before I finished I was kind of invited in no uncertain terms to go on to Ranger School after I had finished there, but there was a little catch to it. There was another stop you had to make along the way, and that was the jump school.
And how'd that work out?
It worked out okay, but it made for a very uncomfortable last 2 weeks at Fort Polk because I'm scared to death of heights and always have been. Left Fort Polk and pulled into Fort Benning, Georgia about, I don't know, 6 o'clock in the morning or something. And I guess it was a hazy day or something because the clouds were lower than the top of the jump tower you're going to go off during week 2. So that was my initiation into it.
So 2 weeks of jump school.
3 weeks of jump school. 1 week on the ground, 2nd week on the tower, 3rd week you jumped.
How was that first jump from the airplane?
I like to tell people that I made a total of 45 jumps, and they were all night jumps because my eyes were closed every time.
Okay, so you finished jump school,
right.
And what's next?
Actually went straight into Ranger School because the first half of it was at Fort Benning.
Mm-hmm. Was Ranger School at Fort Benning?
Yes, the first half of it was.
Right. And the second half?
In Panama. That's their jungle training.
Mm-hmm. And how long was Ranger School?
10 weeks, as I remember.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Then, where to then?
Then across the pond.
Tell me your first impressions when you got off the plane.
Well, we were so happy to be out of Oakland and on a plane. In those days, you went to what they called an overseas reception station or something, and basically you were in jail. You were in this stockade thing with the razor wire all around your concertina, because anytime you got orders from Nam, you know, people tend to disappear during that period of time. So I think we were there 3 days and could do absolutely nothing. We got our shots and things like that, but we weren't allowed to go out and visit anywhere. We got on the plane, took off.
From San Francisco to Vietnam?
From Oakland to the Philippines, from the Philippines to Tanzania. Air America.
Air America. So you get off the plane, and what's your first impression?
We had to low crawl from the plane up to what they called the blockhouse because they were under fire at that point.
This is what month and what year?
It's 1968 and it's January. No, it's January 1968.
Was Tet in?
Tet 1 was in 68.
Soon after you got there, or when you got there?
After.
After.
Their New Year and ours don't coincide. That's about all I can tell you.
Right. So you're there, you crawl to the thing, you're wondering what's going on. What happens then?
We were trucked out of there. The next thing I knew, we were in Phu province.
Mm-hmm.
That was where, you know, I was assigned to the 75th Ranger Regiment, but you didn't have a base camp as a ranger. You were assigned around to other units, and that's where the 101st was. So we were attached to the 101st Airborne.
Mm-hmm. And what was your job?
What was my job? To do whatever they told me at that point, because I was just a E4 at the time.
Mm-hmm. And the first few weeks, what were you doing?
LRP, long range patrol.
Long range patrol. How many in a patrol?
It depended what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
If we were doing night patrols, you know, you went out in groups of 12. Day patrol, you went a little heavier.
Mm-hmm. And did you see action right away?
No, didn't see any for about 3 weeks.
Okay. And your first the first time you did. Can you tell us about that?
We were ambushed along a trail. They weren't set in very well, and we were able to divide and conquer, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so...
time is the weird thing when you're in a firefight. The whole thing probably didn't last 10 minutes. It seemed like we were doing it for a day.
Really? And it was at night?
No, this one was
During the day. Could you see them?
Eventually.
Eventually. Okay. And so you're doing patrols, and you're attached to the 101st Airborne. And how long were you in doing the day and night patrols?
The whole time.
The whole time?
In Vietnam.
Okay. And did you stay in that province?
No. Went all around. We were in Hue. We were in the first push into Cambodia.
Mm-hmm. You went into Cambodia?
Yeah, my foot crossed the line.
Okay. How far into Cambodia did you go?
We never knew.
Oh, okay. The sergeant knew.
I doubt if he knew. I doubt if anybody knew,
Right.
because we weren't supposed to be there in the first place.
Right, right. Did you know that?
Did I know I had been there?
Mm-hmm.
Later on.
Yeah, okay, but not
It was
then.
just another patrol at that point.
Right, right. Tell me about what was the Army like? I mean, what was your experience like as you got into that first year? You know, what impressions did you take away?
Basic training was a piece of cake. They didn't. It really, if you didn't come in there in condition, you wouldn't have gone out of there in condition. AIT was a lot of fun because you got to play with a lot of different weapons. Jump school was probably the scariest thing I've ever done. And Ranger school, met some of the bravest people I'll ever see in my life, and I met some people that were absolutely insane and should never have been anywhere near an armed force.
Did you see them later in Vietnam?
Tried not to, but some of them showed up, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it was it orderly and organized, or did you find it chaotic?
The training was very organized.
Mm-hmm.
Once we got across the pond, I don't think it was meant to be organized over there. Long-range patrol, you very seldom saw a base camp. You know, you made your own mobile camps. Being a ranger, they didn't like to get us near too many cities.
Because?
Rangers had a bad reputation in cities, okay? So we pretty much stuck to the boonies and did our damage out there.
Now, when you went out on patrol, how long would you go for?
It depended.
Generally?
I've been on patrol as short as 12 hours. I've been on patrol as long as 4 weeks.
Really?
Yeah.
And your supervisors were communicating.
We didn't have any supervisors.
Okay, tell me about that. Tell me about that.
We didn't even have officers most of the time. Second lieutenants, I think, had a lifespan of somewhere around 4 days or something in Vietnam. I was the highest ranking officer at the unit that I was in for probably 6 to 7 months. That didn't make me the commanding officer. It just gave me more stripes than everybody else. You know, I was still assigned, and we did a lot of different things. We worked for a lot of different people. We never knew who was sending us out from time to time. A lot of it was CIA stuff that we were having to do. It was we'd get up every morning, and when we got our assignment, we'd say, well, we're here, might as well do it, you know.
So how did you get your assignments?
Sometimes by radio,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes by runner.
Mm-hmm. So as a senior NCO, were you sort of left to organize the, how many were you said 12 in the group generally?
12 in the group, yeah.
And so you would get the orders and say, okay guys, this is where we're going today?
I would be the first one to find out for the group I was taking out
Mm-hmm.
what we were doing, what the mission was, what we hoped to accomplish.
What was the most dangerous mission you went on?
I thought they were all pretty dangerous myself. You know, the first step is always the most dangerous. If you don't step on something then, or they don't get you, you got a good chance of finishing the mission.
And you were there in Vietnam, did you do one tour or two?
Well, I did one tour, but it was kind of extended.
Okay. Over a year.
Yes, 13 months.
And let me go back to organization. How did you feel like that the goals were being accomplished, or?
You mean the mission that we
Yeah,
were given?
yeah.
We accomplished every one of them.
Did you feel like it was aiding in the effort?
Didn't have a clue as what the effort was, you know. My job was to do what they told me to do on any particular day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I wasn't there to save the world.
Mm-hmm.
I was there to do the job. First job every morning was to try to stay alive that day.
Mm-hmm.
Second job was to try to keep my men alive. And the third job was to accomplish whatever we were supposed to do on any given mission. And you kind of kept in the back of your mind, you know, I'm making the world safe for those folks back home. You know, did anybody else believe that except us? I don't know. But that kind of gave us a reason to be while we were there.
How about your men? Did you lose any?
Lost a lot of them over the years. Yeah.
Yeah, over that 13 months.
Yeah.
And how was the support when you had a wounded soldier?
It depended where we were, and it depended if we were doing a CIA thing. It was a little tougher to get medevac in and things like that because not as many people knew where we were.
So really secret missions.
Secret in being we didn't have any radio contact while we were on them, and secret being I'm not sure they had anything to do with the Department of Defense war effort.
Mm-hmm. Did you know?
We didn't have to burn our hands before we went out on them or anything, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't take any blood oaths
Mm-hmm.
for the spooks or anything.
Mm-hmm. And so there really weren't officers.
We saw officers once in a while, but they just didn't last very long.
They would get killed?
A lot of times, yeah.
Were they picked out by the enemy?
No, because, you know, everything was subdued. All the rank was subdued, and half the time you didn't even wear the subdued, so to pick them out would have been pretty tough. Well, they were usually in back anyway, so, or a lot of times they didn't even go on missions.
How was the relationship with the officers?
You didn't like them at all.
Okay. You were almost one, right?
No, I was not an officer.
No, I'm telling you, you're colorblind. They were pushing you to be.
Well, you know.
So there was a real division there between.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's totally a caste system.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's a healthy thing to have somebody to hate that much in a situation like that. It keeps you going.
Right. Now, what about the CIA officers? How was that relationship?
You know, they didn't work with us. They would come in, they would give us a briefing, and then we would go out and do their dirty work and report back to them. They never went. Who we worked with, who were definitely CIA employees, were the Montanards, the mountain people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they had been fighting somebody for 400 years, and it was whoever was paying them to fight at that particular time. You know, the French had left, we came in, so these people were the greatest warriors I ever saw in my life.
How so? Fearless?
Fearless, bloodthirsty, they could shake your hand and put a knife in you at the same time. You wouldn't know the difference.
Did you trust them?
Yeah. Because they were basically working for me, and if you're the one they're working for, they're very, very loyal.
You know, joint patrols with them?
They became part of the patrol.
They were part of your unit?
Yeah. And then sometimes at night they went off and did other things on their own.
And did they speak English?
They spoke French. They spoke Pidgin English. I had taken 2 years of French in college, and I learned a whole lot more French in Vietnam than I did in college, because that was basically the way I communicated with them.
So, tell me your impression from that era of the French. The French left after Dien Bien Phu.
You know, there had been a time span in between. We weren't much into politics. You know, we just there to do a job. So I'm not sure I had any impression of the French at that point.
Right. Other than they'd been there before.
Right. Had an impression of the Chinese that we came across once in a while.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, we saw Chinese, we saw Russians, we saw a lot of folks that we didn't know we were supposed to be fighting, but they were right there.
Did you capture?
Sometimes.
Or you could identify the bodies that they were?
We knew they weren't Vietnamese. It was up to somebody else to figure out, you know, their lineage.
How would you do that? Would you take photographs, or take the bodies back, or take documents, or?
Photographs. We didn't take the bodies back.
Were documents important?
If we could find them.
Did you find many?
Seemed to find a lot over the period of time we were out.
And they went to the CIA?
We didn't usually tell folks we were coming, so they didn't have time to hide anything.
Night patrols?
Night, early morning. Orientals like to sleep late. It's easy to find them 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. They didn't fight so well when they're first getting out of bed.
And what time did they would stay up late and sleep late?
They've been known to party pretty hard the night before. That was a good time to go after them, was the next day.
So was a lot of this collecting information? I mean, I'm trying to do the CIA connection was...
We took back any documents we found. We didn't do the processing, they did, okay? You never knew what their connection was. You just had an assignment, you went out and did it. I guess their connection was they wanted less people to be around at the end than when we started.
Did you get R&R?
I missed both my R&Rs. I was supposed to go to Australia on one, and we were pinned down in Hue then, so, you know, there weren't any tour guides coming in to pick us up to take us to Australia. And the second time I'd already gotten hit, so it wasn't available.
Okay, you were wounded?
Wounded twice, yeah.
Twice?
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that?
Took small arms fire in the shoulder. And the last time I took shrapnel in the head. That was the end.
Did that end your service?
Well, it ended my fighting days. I spent about 8.5 months in the military hospitals after that. So.
And it was a shell or
shrapnel? Yeah, incoming.
Incoming
artillery blew up. I was in a tree sleeping, blew me out of the tree, and did some damage.
Were you, do you remember it, or were you medevaced out, or?
I remember the place lighting up. I remember my temperature going up. It felt like 10 degrees. Mm-hmm. I remember being medevaced. I remember asking the guy, could I get oxygen? And he says, I can't give you that until I think you're going to die. So I told him to keep the stuff. And after that, I don't remember much. Mm-hmm. I was in Hawaii for 6 weeks at, I think, an Air Force hospital there, and people asked me about my trip to Hawaii. The only time I've ever been, I told them Hawaii looks like the back of my eyelids to me. So I don't know much about Hawaii.
How were you treated? How, I mean,
in Hawaii, I don't know.
Right. But the overall.
Nobody woke me up.
So you were in a coma?
Yeah, I'd had the first surgery while I was there.
Mm-hmm. And it took. Where did you go from after you left Hawaii?
I went to where's the first place? I went to the Philippines, to the old Clark Air Force Base Hospital. I went from there to Martin Army Hospital in Georgia, and from there to Walter Reed. And
how would you, I mean, in terms of how you were treated and recovery, and was it, did you get good care?
It was okay. I don't use them now.
Right, right. Well, how much time did you have left when you were injured?
17 days.
Did you feel? Were you nervous toward the end as you got close to that?
At that point, a lot of people were being held over. Mm-hmm. It was fairly hot at that point, and so, if you went 30 days over, I think they were actually even paying you a bonus if you went over. So you knew what the ETS was, but you didn't pay much attention to it because you kind of figured you'd stay over anyway.
Mm-hmm. And you were injured in what month, what year?
Gosh, the year was 1971. The month was March, I believe.
Mm-hmm. And so things were, people were being held on.
Yeah.
A lot of action in 71.
71 was pretty hot where we were.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what did it was it building the whole time you were there, getting to be more and more?
It was cyclic,
Mm-hmm.
Really hot, down. We could always tell when it was down because that's when we got all the CIA stuff to do. But there was less Army work to do, I guess, at that period of time. Mm-hmm. But we had Tet 2, we had Way, we had first trip into Cambodia. Those were the kind of things, what you would call the hottest.
Mm-hmm. What about the living conditions? Did you get to go back to? I know they kept you out of the cities because you were a ranger.
Didn't get to see a city.
But did you
I
get
got
to go?
See Way. I was within about 200 yards of it one time. But
you got to go to base camp, or?
We would go to base camps. Most of the time, we were in the field.
Okay. And what was that like?
It was unsanitary. You could go 6 weeks with one set of uniforms and one set of boots. Food sucked. I learned how to trade rations. I could live on the peanut butter and crackers for weeks at a time. I mean, that potted meat was a mystery to me. I wasn't eating that stuff. Eggs were god awful, the powdered eggs. So I ate a lot of peanut butter when I was over there. And, you know, we could always find a village that was fairly friendly and we didn't think would poison us that day, that we could get some rice and things like that.
Mm-hmm. So it was sort
If we ever saw a Navy boat coming up the river, we'd hail them down and do some trading. We collected souvenir flags and stuff like that. And of course, they never saw any of that stuff since they never had any action. So, and we trade. They had all kinds of good food on those Navy boats. So we trade.
Were these small boats?
Yes,
The
river runners.
River runners.
Yeah.
You got along with the Navy people?
I negotiated with them and left them. We didn't have any interaction with them.
Mm-hmm. But the food was...
They had good food, we didn't. Our sucked, yeah. I ate more native food than I ate anything else while I was over there.
So you were happy when you saw a boat coming?
Yeah.
Okay.
Even if it did have Navy people on it.
Okay, so you come home, you're injured. Tell me about your Walter Reed. Tell me about your recovery.
I had to learn to walk, had to learn to use my hands again. Just generally get back with the program.
Mm-hmm. And how were you received when you came home? By
You
the
mean
general?
Walter Reed?
After Walter Reed, after your discharge.
I was very fortunate. During the time that I was at Walter Reed, a gentleman who had known me as an athlete when I was at the University of Illinois visited, and he was teaching a program at Indiana University, a master's degree program in sports medicine. And he asked me what my plans were when I got out. And I told him I didn't know if I was ever even going to get out. And he said, well, why don't you come into this program? I can get you a scholarship. And I told him I'd think about it. When I finally saw I was going to get out of the hospital, I didn't have a whole lot else to do. So I had my GI Bill, and I had this scholarship that I actually made money while I was there between these two things. So I went through 2 years of graduate school, and that I think helped me transition better than if I had had to go back into a regular workforce or something like that.
How was your health when you were in graduate school that first time?
It got better.
But you were still recuperating when you went.
Yeah, but being in a sports medicine program, I had a lot of rehabilitation facilities at my beck and call.
And you took advantage of that.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that was really part of your recovery.
Well, the rest of your life's part of your recovery.
Right. We'll talk about that. Are there, when you talk about the rest of your life, did that 13 months, do you think about it often? Do you, the injury, the time in Vietnam?
Don't think about the injury much. You know, that's history. It hasn't stopped me from doing most of the things that I want to. You didn't get to know folks there because chances are they weren't going to be there the next day or later that day. I think that probably had, if I could say, a derogatory effect on my life. I just never allowed myself to get too close to anyone from that day forward.
And it was different before the experience.
Yeah, but I was a kid then, so I don't know. you grow up fast when you see people get blown up, you know. It was a very unconventional war. We thought, the United States Army thought that they had all the training for us to fight a guerrilla war, and come to find out that guerrillas knew more about it than we did. So a lot of times we were unprepared for what we were going to see.
They maybe had more experience from the French and the Chinese and the, would you say, 400 years of
probably, yeah,
of guerrilla warfare?
Yeah. Well, plus, you know, I guess they're on their own soil. Their backs against the wall. They don't really understand who we are or what we're doing there. We didn't understand it most of the time, so we couldn't expect them to. It's like anything else. You can be a fairly peaceful person when your back's against the wall. You're coming forward. So, yeah, they're pretty good fighters.
So you did that, and then you went to law school?
No, I went to law school later.
Later, okay. What happened after you finished your graduate degree?
Then I decided I wanted to box again.
Okay.
Now, that had been part of my therapy, was the heavy bag and the footwork and things like that. So,
did you box professionally?
yes.
For how long?
For parts of 14 years.
Mm-hmm.
Always had a day job, but
Did you win?
won a lot of times. Lost a few.
Okay.
Go back to your day job on Monday and your nose is facing the wrong way and you can't see out of either eye. But fortunately, my day job was in sports, so people tended to understand that.
With your military injury, was there any issue with boxing?
Oh, yeah.
But
Very hard to get the first license. Once you get the first license, matter of fact, I actually had to go out of the country to get the first license. And then you play the reciprocity game. You find somebody who's going to accept that foreign license, and you get licensed in that state and find out who they've got reciprocity with, and you get licensed because you don't want to go through a physical.
did your doctors want you to box?
I really didn't ask them to get their opinion.
Do you think they wanted you to box?
We'll never know.
We'll never. Right. So, okay, you go back and you're doing exercise work and you're boxing. Did you go back to law school after your boxing career?
Yes.
Hey, this was in Chicago? You were boxing in Chicago?
Well, I boxed a lot of places. You know, like I said, I always had a day job, and wherever my day job was, I was out of Boston for a number of years. I was out of Indianapolis for a number of years. Out of Chicago for several years.
You were working in those cities. Right. So tell me about going to law school. How'd you decide that?
Well, actually, Muhammad Ali helped me decide that.
Tell me about that.
I was working in Miami, and I trained out of the Fifth Avenue gym, Miami Beach, which was Angelo Dundee's gym, and Muhammad was training there. And, well, he had his own part of the gym, and the rest of us had the rest of it. I'm not even sure we breathed the same air. His was probably filtered. But I had a fight one Saturday night at the Miami Convention Center, and lo and behold, as I'm coming at the ring, Muhammad's sitting in the front row. So I won the fight, and it takes about 5 days to get back into the gym. And so 5th, 6th day, I'm back in the gym. I'm hitting the heavy bag, and he comes walking over to where I'm hitting the bag. Hey, and he says, I saw you fight the other night. And I didn't say anything. I figured I'm going to get some good tips, so I just he'd hit in the bag, and he's standing there, and finally he looks at me and he says, "They tell me you're in graduate school. You should study hard." So I figured at that point, you know, he knew more about it than I did, so.
He sent you a message.
Yeah.
And how old were you then?
I was in my 30s at that
Right.
point. You know, it's probably something I should have figured out on my own, but when you hear it from him, it has a little more meaning.
So, and that was your one, that was your only conversation with Muhammad Ali?
At that point,
Yeah.
I've had conversations with him after he got sick. I've gone down to see him, but yeah, boxed out of the same gym for 3 years. That's the only time we ever talked.
Right, right. But it changed your life.
Yeah, it sent it in a different direction.
Sent it in a different direction. So you had a legal career.
Well, I loved law school. I hated practicing law. I did it for 6 years, and one day I missed what I used to do, so I went back into sports medicine. I've been in it ever since.
And you're currently teaching?
I'm director of the athletic training education program at the University of Mobile.
Okay. And you've been here for how long?
Since '99.
99. Okay. So it's been an interesting trip.
Yeah, along the way.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you.
Thank you.
Good recollections. Thank you. That was a great story.
Only one I got.